She never imagined that the person she trusted most would be the one to break her heart. Yet on that cold evening, as she sat alone in the dimly lit living room waiting for him to come home, something inside her already knew the truth. The clock kept ticking. The dinner she had lovingly prepared had gone cold, and the excuses on his phone screen replayed in her mind like a haunting echo. Just a little more work. Don't wait up. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the silence was heavier. When the door finally opened, he wore the same tired smile, the same carefully practiced lie. And instead of questioning him, she simply watched, studying every movement, every hesitation, every nervous glance toward his phone. Because deep down, she was no longer the woman who doubted herself. She was the woman who was finally ready to see the truth. Their story had begun years earlier, full of promises, whispered dreams, and sacrifices she made without ever asking for anything in return. She supported him when he had nothing, worked extra hours to help him stand on his feet, believed in his success more than he believed in himself. And in those early days, she truly thought they were a team, a couple who could survive anything. But slowly, almost silently, things began to change. Late-night meetings replaced family dinners. Affection turned into distant conversations, and his once warm voice became cold and distracted. He guarded his phone like a secret he was afraid might escape, laughed at messages he refused to explain, and created an emotional distance she could no longer ignore. At first, she tried to convince herself that it was stress, work, pressure, or because she loved him too much to accept the possibility of betrayal. She blamed herself, questioned her worth, and tried harder to make the relationship feel alive again. But the more she gave, the further he drifted away. And on that night, sitting quietly across from him, she realized something life-changing. The man sitting in front of her was no longer the man she once loved, and instead of breaking down, she decided that this time, she would not cry, she would not beg, and she would not confront him in anger. She would stay silent, observe, and prepare. Because the moment she discovered the truth, her silence would become the beginning of a revenge he would never forget. She always believed that love meant patience, sacrifice, and trust. And for years, she lived her life by those principles. Every morning, she woke before sunrise, prepared breakfast, and encouraged him before work, reminding him that one day all their struggles would be worth it. She stood beside him when he was broke, when his business failed, when he doubted his own worth. She sold her jewelry to help him pay debts, sacrificed her dreams so he could chase his. And each time he promised, "I'll make it up to you one day," she believed him. Their small apartment carried memories of laughter, late-night conversations, and promises whispered in the dark. But as success slowly entered his life, something else began to enter the distance. He no longer looked at her with warmth, no longer shared stories about his day. Instead, his phone became his new companion. Work dinners turned into late nights, unexplained absences replaced affection, and the man who once held her hand now avoided her eyes. She still convinced herself it was stress, until the night she noticed his smile fading when she walked into the room. Doubts crept into her heart, like quiet shadows, slowly filling every corner of her mind. She began noticing the little things, perfume that wasn't hers lingering on his clothes, unfamiliar names appearing on his call log, and messages that disappeared moments after being read. Whenever she asked gentle questions, he reacted with irritation instead of reassurance. He accused her of being insecure, dramatic, and suspicious for no reason. So, she stopped asking. She started watching instead. She observed how he guarded his phone as if it held his entire life, how he took calls in another room, how his face changed whenever a particular notification appeared. Late nights grew longer, and excuses grew weaker. But she remained calm. To him, she looked silent and naive. But inside, her heart was slowly preparing for the truth. She spent her nights awake, replaying memories, wondering when love had turned into secrecy. She didn't want to believe he could betray her, not after everything they had survived together. But deep inside, she knew that faith alone could not save a relationship already broken. And one evening, when he rushed out, claiming another urgent meeting, she finally decided it was time to follow him. The city streets were quiet as she sat in a taxi a few cars behind his, her hands trembling but her mind steady. She watched him stop in front of a restaurant, not the office, not a meeting hall, but a cozy, candlelit place meant for romance. From the shadows, she saw him step out of the car. adjusting his shirt, fixing his hair, wearing the smile she hadn't seen in months. And then, another woman appeared, young, confident, beautifully dressed. She walked toward him with familiarity. He didn't hesitate for a second. He hugged her tightly, the way he used to hold his wife. They laughed, they touched hands. They looked like lovers who felt no guilt. Her heart shattered quietly, but no tear fell. Instead, a calm wave washed over her. The truth no longer needed proof. She took pictures, saved his messages, recorded his lies, not out of anger, but clarity. Standing in the darkness outside the restaurant, she realized something powerful. The man who vowed loyalty had already chosen betrayal long ago, and in that moment, she didn't feel weak anymore. She felt awake. And awakening was the beginning of her revenge. She returned home before him that night and sat in silence, staring at the life they had built together, the framed wedding photos on the wall, the couch where they dreamed of the future, the home she had turned into a sanctuary. But now, every memory felt tainted. Instead of confronting him with rage, she greeted him calmly when he arrived, pretending to be unaware of his lies. He relaxed, believing his secrets were safe. Over the next few days, she played her role perfectly. The supportive wife, the quiet partner, the woman who trusted him blindly. But behind that silence, she began preparing. She gathered financial records, secured her documents, transferred savings into her own account, and made copies of every piece of evidence. She consulted a lawyer discreetly, learning her rights and protections. Every detail mattered. Every step was calculated. She no longer wanted a confrontation filled with shouting and tears. She wanted truth to speak for itself. And while he thought he was manipulating her emotions, she was already planning the day when his lies would collapse in front of everyone he cared about. The perfect opportunity arrived when he announced a family dinner. A gathering meant to celebrate his recent business success. He proudly invited relatives, friends, and colleagues, eager to show the world how successful and respected he had become. He expected admiration, applause, and praise. Instead, he was about to receive something else. She prepared everything with grace. The food, the decorations, the warm, welcoming smile. No one could sense the storm quietly waiting beneath her calm expression. As guests filled the room, he boasted about loyalty, hard work, and dedication, pretending to be the perfect husband. She listened silently until the moment arrived. With steady hands, she placed a folder on the table and gently opened it. Photographs, call logs, and messages spilled out like shattered glass. The room fell silent. His smile vanished. Family members stared in disbelief. The truth lay exposed. Undeniable, undeniable, undeniable. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply said, "This is the man who broke his own vows." Her voice was calm, but her words cut deeper than anger ever could. The woman he betrayed her with tried calling him, but he froze, unable to defend himself. Relatives who once admired him now looked at him with disappointment. Every lie he created collapsed in a single moment. He stuttered excuses, claiming misunderstandings, blaming stress, accusing her of invading his privacy. But nothing could erase the evidence before them. She handed him divorce papers calmly, documents already prepared and legally secured. Everything he once controlled, finances, property, credibility, now slipped from his hands. She stood tall, not as a victim, but as a woman who chose self-respect over betrayal. With quiet dignity, she walked away from the table, leaving him drowning in the consequences of his own actions. The other woman disappeared from his life the moment his truth became public. His reputation shattered, his relationships fractured, and suddenly he understood that betrayal doesn't just destroy love. It destroys the betrayer. But it was too late. The damage he caused could never be undone. Days passed, and while he struggled with regret and loneliness, she began rebuilding her life piece by piece. At first, the silence felt heavy, but slowly it transformed into peace. She started focusing on herself, her dreams, her career, her happiness. She surrounded herself with people who valued her instead of using her. The world that once felt small now seemed open and full of possibility. She no longer replayed his betrayal in her mind. Instead, she saw it as a turning point. The moment she chose strength over suffering. She learned that a real revenge wasn't destroying someone. It was rising beyond them. Her pain didn't make her bitter. It made her wiser, sharper, and stronger than ever before. She realized that love should never demand silence, sacrifice, or the death of one's own identity. True love grows, it does not betray. One evening, as she watched the sunset from her new home, she finally understood the meaning of closure. Revenge had never been about humiliating him. It was about freeing herself from a life built on lies. He tried calling her many times, begging for forgiveness, asking for another chance, promising change, but she never looked back. Because forgiveness and reunion are different things, and sometimes the greatest act of strength is walking away without hatred. She chose peace, not punishment, healing, not bitterness, and with every new step forward, she discovered a version of herself she never knew existed. Confident, independent, unbreakable. Her story was not about betrayal anymore. It was about rebirth, and in the end, the greatest revenge she ever took was choosing her own happiness. In the end, her story was not just about betrayal, nor about the pain she endured in silence. It was about transformation. She walked through heartbreak, faced the harsh truth, and chose dignity over chaos. Instead of breaking down, she rebuilt herself, proving that strength is not found in revenge, fueled by anger, but in the decision to walk away with self-respect. The man who once believed she would always wait, always forgive, was left alone with the consequences of his own actions, while she stepped into a new life, where her worth was no longer measured by someone else's loyalty. Her journey reminds us that sometimes life breaks us only to rebuild us stronger, and sometimes the greatest justice is simply choosing yourself, closing the door quietly, and never looking back.